Happy New Year, selectors, and welcome to the Life Burst Podcast.
A
I'm Andrew.
Wixoss
A
podcast.
Wecross podcast.
Who are you again? Sorry, I
I'm
interrupted
Andrew.
you. I'm
It's
Tiffany.
been a while since we did one of these.
Welcome back to the Life Burst podcast. It is 2023. I hope you all had a really happy holiday season for yourself. We took a little break. We had some family in town. We wanted to kind of take a break from everything. And how was your winter Wecross break?
It was pretty good. So I did a lot of like theory testing and crafting, like deck building during that time, looking into feature sets just to make my life a little easier when we get to making those decks that are coming out, because we do have a new set coming out on the not this month, the next month, February like 26th or something like that, 24th. So we're just looking at stuff like that, and also looking at what the metagame is in Japan currently. Just keeping myself abreast of those things.
Yeah, seems good.
And speaking of metagame, right? That's going to be our topic today. But question, genuine question, I need you guys to actually message and comment on this video down below, because I don't know, and I don't have access to this information unless you guys tell me. What are the decks that are commonly played at your locals right now?
Yeah. Where do you play, and what do you see played most often?
Yeah. That way it'll help me sort of figure out a little bit what's going on in the US metagame. I know what's happening in our local metagame. I ask sometimes some people in various key places like Turn Zero games and stuff. But I don't have access to everything. Also, I know what's going on in Loot Card Tournament, but that's about it. So if you guys want to tell me what decks you guys are playing and what decks you often see at your local, that would help us out a lot.
Yeah, then we can give you more data information.
Yeah, totally.
Andrew loves data and spreadsheets.
Love data information.
Data information.
So Tiffany, how was now that we're back in Wecrossing? How was your Wecross week?
It was pretty good. Played Loot Card. That was fun. It was it was like an uphill battle the whole time because I took Umer, and there were a lot of decks that were just really difficult matchups for me, and then a couple that I weren't like expecting, that like had cards I just like wasn't expecting. So it was my best performance, I'll like openly admit, but it was fun to like get back into the swing of things. I have grown to really like Loot Card tournaments, especially because I end up running into some of you guys playing there, and then we can like have a cool conversation. Like there was one person that I ended up losing against, I think, and he had a different version of an Umer deck that he wanted to test against mine. So after the tournament, we actually played an extra match to just cross-section our Umer decks together. It was really fun.
Yeah, and we're definitely looking at retooling your Umer. I did well,
Yes.
though, at the Loot Card.
Tell us all about it.
I took first place.
Nice.
And it was a difficult one, right? Like I was against people who do very well in ceremonies and stuff, so it wasn't like it was an easy battle to get there. But I did it with the unexpected. I did it with Bang.
Let us know. You cracked Bang Center.
I think I did. I think it's really good, and I think people don't respect green enough in this format.
And on this podcast, we respect green.
Well, yeah, I mean, I correctly analyze green as being probably the weakest of the colors, but that's not to say that it's not good. Like, it is good. It's just you need to use it correctly. Green, we were talking about how green's real weakness is the fact that it really can't shift through its own deck very well. I mean, you can kind of by taking stuff from your enter, but then you're robbing yourself. Basically, you need to enter charge to draw, and that's a 2-step program instead of drawing a card, which is a 1-step program. And so I added black and blue for the consistency of the deck, and it functioned very well. Like, I was able to grind with some of these decks that are like constantly making me discard, like those top end discard tier 1 discard decks, and I was like, that's fine. I always have things to work with, and I'm always smashing you.
Yeah, I ran into that a lot too with just like the discarding, and I'm like, wow, I can't fill my field. This is bad. Like, there was one game that I didn't have any more than 2 Signies on my field for 2 turns in a row. It
Yeah.
was brutal. Like, the second time that happened, I was like, there's no way I'm winning this.
It was strange, I will admit, that I was playing a deck with like very little interaction. And it actually felt great. Like, it felt like way different, right? Because I'm normally playing a red Enter Burn deck, or I'm playing a white Enter Denial deck, or I'm playing a blue discard deck, right? And then this time I was just playing like, this is damage output, and it can go as long as the game needs it to go, right? And like for my finals, to be clear here, right? And this is strange, crazy, right? My finals went to turn 11, and I was playing a green deck. Right, that's nuts. The thought that you could go that long with something people perceive as the weakest color, but realistically,
Doesn't sound so weak anymore to me.
No, I supplemented the things that are not so great in that. But like Osagetsune, still a crazy good card. Lancer is still an insane ability that people are undervaluating. It doesn't really matter if your whole field has Shadow, which I had to deal with a lot because I just Lancered through it. I just pierced through it and it was fine. And then another thing that I did really well was I also managed Mill very, very well. I think the jig's up. Guys, you should really be using stuff like Enigma Labyrinth.
Miasma
Labyrinth. Yeah.
Enigma Labyrinth. That's roughly the same.
Really good. And
the jig is up. I like that.
And like I was running like the whole deck, like, and I'll put a deck link in here. The whole deck was functioned exactly how I planned it out to, which is the first time I've really done that, where I've been like, I will have this on turn 2, I will have this on turn 1, I will have this on turn 3, I will have this on turn 4, and then I'll have this on turn 5, and this is how my deck runs, right? And it functioned exactly the way that I planned it, because it had just the right amount of deck filtering, just the right amount of like, and I was using the hyper geometric calculator to make sure that like, what's the right number? Oh, 2 Phalaris is the right number with the amount of draw that I'm doing, the amount of recursion
hyper geometric calculator.
Yeah, that's how you know what your chances are of drawing a certain type of card.
Remember, children, deck building is math.
It's just math.
Which is why I don't do it.
Anyways,
so you've really found success building a deck around your favorite center.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna continue to do that. I think Bang is actually probably top tier good.
Oh, bold statement.
I don't know if it's like innately as good as X or Tamago or Tama or Atomic Deus, but it pairs well into the top decks, which means that even though it in a vacuum maybe isn't as good, it is good. But that's my thought anyways with it, is that I'm going to keep doing it. I like it a lot. I think it's actually very good. And I have found, generally speaking, that you want a deck that you know really, really well the ins and outs of, as well as that it can play good against the metagame. And this sort of has that cross-section that I'm looking for now. I used to be looking for stuff that has more lopsided matchups, like Hirano wins 80% against the meta, but then loses hard to Nova or something like that. But I no longer am seeking decks like that as we move forward. I'm looking for like 52% win rate across the board. Or even like 50% win rate across the board, allowing my player skill to be the deciding factor as to whether I win or lose 2 matchups. And my opponents, I'm not going to rob my opponents of their good skill and stuff like that too. But that actually transfers. I don't know what I'm trying to segues the
excellent, flawless, seamless segue there, babe.
Thank you. That's what they pay me the big bucks for.
Yep.
And so they pay me all the wheat cross coins for. The thing that I think we can talk about next is metagame, right?
Let's talk about it.
The clever title of the podcast today is New Metagame, Who Dis?
So we're talking about tier lists, metagame, what?
Yeah, just metagame stuff in general. So I think a good thing to start is I read a lot of, while I was doing the deep dives of the Japanese GP that happened like in the 11th month, which is November. Got my numbers. I'm all numbered up.
Do you need a second winter break? Or
Probably.
Me, I do.
No, I I looked into the GP, and I actually read a couple blogs that some of the people from Japan did, who were like, I think the third place, fourth place, and sixth place. I think that was the numbers that they came into, because I wanted to understand a little bit about their decks, and I also wanted a little understand of what's kind of going on in the Japanese meta right now. What I actually found was pretty overwhelmingly, even though this GP was 300 people big, they do the same thing that America does, where literally the guy who placed in third was like, it's a fool's errand to try to figure out what the Wixoss meta is.
I think that's really valid now, considering just how saturated the center signies have gotten. It's really hard to kind of build your win strategy, or like when you not necessarily your deck, but like how you come into a match based off of how you're going to win against this the team build, and not necessarily how the deck is built from your opponent. So I agree with that. I think it's just really difficult to try and figure out exactly what everybody's doing in their Lurig deck.
Yeah, and I mean, like, outside of that too, it's even like he was like, well, you know, it's impossible to figure out what you're trying to do, because the meta is not people trying. The meta is some amount of people trying to win, but a lot of it is people trying to win with their favorite deck, right? Which is true. Look, I just took Bang and won the loot card tournament with Bang. If you were to be like, okay, so Bang is better than X, I'd be like, no.
Yeah, and how long have I not let go of Ancient Surprise yet? Despite it all. Like, I could be playing X, I could be playing Deus, I could be playing, like, an updated, like, Card Jockey or something, or Madoka Tamago, but I don't really want to.
Right, and he said kind of an interesting thing, too, where he was talking about how he was looking for... just TDLR it, guys, because we got to get into the actual metagame stuff itself that's happening with this new set. But the TDLR is that he basically said it's stupid to try to figure out what's going on in Wixoss in terms of the Elrig deck, because of because of the how saturated the Elrigs are, and how defiantly people are choosing to play a certain Elrig over another Elrig. But he then also was like, but the main decks are actually not too different, right? What's the difference between a white, what's the difference between a blue-black Paraluke, a blue-black Tamago, and a blue-black Ray? The answer is nothing. They're the same. They're discard decks. The way they do their discards may be a little different, but they're discard control decks, right? And he was like, so... really, generally, you should be thinking about it in terms of archetypes, right? What's the difference between Akino, mono-white aggro, and Tama, mono-white aggro? The answer is they're mono-white aggro. They're both mono-white aggro. Maybe Tama is slightly better because of her ability, but they're mono-white aggro.
Yeah, and I think a lot of you guys could probably agree with us in just, like, noticing this, that people might be building their Lurig decks however they want to, but what they're really doing is they're playing a deck archetype. And what we're starting to see as we get more cards in our pool of cards that we are allowed to play with, which is everything, like there's no like roll off list, which is kind of nice. Yeah. We're really starting to see certain cards rise to the top, as it were. Remember's going to be at the top of the list for white. There's like Osagetsune still pretty much sits at the top for green. All these cards that people just really tend to gravitate towards for certain archetypes. And that is a much more consistent way to inform yourself when you are preparing to go into things like ceremonies or loot cards or your local games or whatever.
What's the difference between X aggro, Hirana aggro, and Yuki aggro? The answer, Yuzuki aggro. It's all red enter burn aggro. Right. So that is basically the way that he was saying, like, moving forward, you need to start planning for archetypes, not necessarily centers.
Yeah. And like the centers might be able to inform like the smaller undertones of a deck, but if you can address the larger overtones, That's, again, a much more efficient way to prepare yourself for a match.
Yeah, totally. Like, if you were to ask, what is my bang archetype that I have been working on, and the
What
answer
is your bang archetype you've been working on?
So Magic the Gathering people would understand this terminology. I don't know if there's other card games that have sort of a similar deck to this, and if you do know about that in Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon, please let me know. But this deck type is called the Rock. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. I know the history of it. It's literally called the Rock because of Dwayne Johnson, by the way. It was an archetype in Magic called the Rock because there was basically one center figure who was really difficult to deal with and dealt a lot of damage that they named basically Dwayne Johnson, and it was the Rock and his millions. So the rest was all the things that they could do with it. It's an attrition-based archetype where it's like, instead of valuing discard as much as these blue-black mid-range decks do, it values board position more. There's a world where my blue in the deck probably needs to switch to white. That is what I'm thinking about recently. I'm not willing to do it yet because I just need the consistency that blue gives me right now, and I think maybe next set I swap, but I don't know. In the meantime, though, it's basically just a black-green attrition archetype, right? But if you look at a lot of these, there's a lot of these common threads, right? What is Atomic Deus? Atomic Deus is a mid-range discard deck.
Yeah, that's the archetype, not Atomic. Atomic is not the archetype, it's the flair of the deck.
It's how it accomplished that archetype, right? Yeah. And then
these are all different things.
You look at like Paraluke, you look at Tamago, you say, what are those? You say they're discard. They're discard control decks because they're using discard to control the game. Mono white, you've also got white-based mid-range decks that Tama is leading, but they're all the same. But they really are. Like, it doesn't matter if they're... You can look at them and look at the centers and go, it's Tama mid-range because it's not mono white. And we're flavoring it with blue-black. Okay, so it must be some form of blue-black mid-range discard. Oh, they flavored it with green-red. Okay, so it must be some form of sort of like aggressive stompy deck. Like that's how you do that math in your head. But anyways, that's what the guy in Japan said, and I tend to agree with him. He also had one other thing that I thought was kind of important, and it's not about the metagame. He basically was saying he's looking for a deck that can perform well generically across the field for any tournament that has basically 7 or more rounds in it. Because he's like, with like 5 and under rounds, you might want to look for something that and you might want to look for something that like you could go hot in, right?
And something you like.
Right.
That you're just naturally drawn to.
Right. And something that you like. But like basically being like, for those smaller round things, it's better to bring power to the table than it is to bring consistency to the table.
Yeah, I think that that's such an interesting insight, and the more I think about it, the more I also agree with this. Is, with our locals, like, we tend to really only go like 3 rounds, maybe 4 if we tend to have a little bit more people. And I'd much rather bring like a powerful deck that I know is going to perform well for our specific local meta for those. And then for ceremonies, I would much rather show up with a deck that I just really love to play. And if I do really well, then I can put it on the map. But if I don't do well, at least I had fun.
Right. But I will say...
That is also what I feel is very consistent in terms of like how it operates. I want to be able to take a deck that I not only like, but after practicing with it, I can trust.
Yeah,
for those longer ceremonies.
Yeah, I hear you, because what I'm saying is that in let's say we had 4 rounds, right? You go 3-1, you probably made it to top 8. What about if you go 6-1? You have definitely made it to top 16, probably. Again, probably, but you don't win. You are not winning anymore, right? Like you've lost the chance to win the tournament. And so you basically are saying if I'm trying to be the best, I'm either going 7-0 or it doesn't really matter what I go, right? Like, and that was even me when I lost at the ceremony on round 1. I was like, And then I lost round 2. I was like, well, I can go 5-2 here, and that will give me an okay score, but I'm never going to get top 16 anymore. Like, it's already, the lethal dose has happened.
Yeah.
So I played, and I got 5-2, which was great, but I ended that one being like, wow, I wish I kind of got top 16. I wish those 2 losses could have came in round 5 or 6 or something. But like, that's just how it goes. And I look back at it, and I was like, man, I played Atomic Deus, and it was a good one. I know that I won just due to raw power 5 rounds in a row, basically. Mm-hmm. But if I was playing something like I'm playing now, I would have.
You think you would have done
maybe
better?
Gone 6-1 or maybe 7-0.
So let's get into that then. You've got like a nice little organized list for us.
Yeah, it's on the screen now.
Do you want to start at the top or do you want to start at the bottom?
Which one do you want to start
at? Let's start at the bottom.
Okay.
Make it a build up.
So D tier is and you guys...
Oh wait, really quick. Hold on. I have a question before we start.
Yes.
Comment below, since we just talked about all this. Comment below your favorite archetype and your favorite center. Mm-hmm. And let us know which one, if they correlate or if they don't correlate.
Yeah, and it's interesting because sometimes
they don't.
It's so strange in this WeCross game because I'm a sweaty tryhard. So I see
You are a little bit.
I see a deck archetype that I really like and I think is well positioned in the meta. And I sort of like find a good center who can perform that task, and then I'm like, I like it. But there are a lot of people who do the opposite. They find a center they like, and then they're like, what archetype works best for this? And then that's how they proceed.
That's me. I'm a vibe jock player.
Yeah.
Like I'm not here to like necessarily min max.
That's our dog.
Sorry, 1 second, y'all. I'm here to play. I'm gonna be honest. I'm here to win. But if the deck don't vibe right, we gotta tweak it. We gotta do something, or I gotta switch to a different deck. However, I would much prefer to tweak my favorite center first before saying this is not working.
Yeah.
So we're a little opposites with that. All right. So where at the bottom do you want to start?
I'll just start at the top at the bottom, which is strange.
The top at the bottom. Okay. So we're gonna start with the B tier.
D tier.
D tier.
Yeah. So, guys, we're only going to quickly go over the D tier and the C tier. I'm not upkeeping those decks anymore just because there's way too many to keep control of.
Is that what Andrew doesn't cover anymore means?
Yeah, there's literally a line that's like, look, guys, this is what I'm going to start giving up.
Why is...
It's just because there's look, if you count how many there are above that line, it's still like 22. All right.
Yeah.
That's too many.
It is a varied field. So
So if you guys want to hear the initial thoughts on what I thought the meta would settle at, you can check out one of our old videos where we talk about the meta. But this is just sort of our mid-season update that you're going to get until February. And at the bottom, you've got Musica with an Atomic Shell, it's the second Senga that just came out, Tamago with that's a freeze control, it would be teamed. And then Wolf, which is teamed.
Now, what does the blue highlight mean?
The blue highlight just means that it's a new deck.
Oh,
that
it's
came
new.
out. Yeah.
Okay.
So these cards, these are all sort of decks that have a theme or flavor, and they may have some kind of power, they may have some kind of consistency, but they've got nothing that really puts them over the edge. They're not like super developed, super layered. I think you could win games with them perfectly fine. Like you will be able to go to your 3-round, 4-round locals and probably 3-1 with one of these decks probably. So
we're looking at the original Musica and the original Tamago and the original Wolf.
Yep.
Okay.
And
yeah, we've seen Wolf perform well in a ceremonial, though there's newer cards to support it now. Yeah. It doesn't mean that it's the most consistent.
The issue is if you look at the bottom, they're all teamed, right? And it's not that team doesn't have power, because they do have power stuff. But the ability to choose your own Elrigs at this point is so much stronger than having a team Signy.
Well, also, there's a lot of pieces to support a dream team over a team build. So it's arguable as to which one is better than the other.
One of our commenters even said, I think I would run Miasma Labyrinth over Salvage the Future for for Diagram. And
I would agree
don't
with
think he's
that.
wrong. I think
Yeah.
that's probably correct.
You
and
just
the
get
thing
more
is,
out of it.
that's a dream team piece, right? So you'd be giving up your team piece. So why are you even in team at that point?
Yeah, just pick the ones you like or pick the ones that best suit your archetype.
Then moving up, in our C tier, I think these are all decks that you can all play and they would be perfectly reasonable to play.
Especially if you like them.
Yeah, especially if you like them and you have them at their most optimum form. I think you'll probably be pretty consistent with them. And that's going to be a Deus. It's a white-black mid-range sort of value setup. Then there's a Musica 2, which is more of an aggro deck, balancing Hanayo.
Hanayo.
To get more double crush in the game.
That's so interesting because that goes from a traditional mid-range to aggro with the new center.
Yep. And then Ott, sadly.
That's the
Worlds Reversed.
original Ott? It's not even Ott 2?
No, it's probably Ott 2. I just took out the 2.
Oh, okay. I was about to be like, why are you running the original? This is coming from me, the Ancient Surprise stan.
And then Nova, which soft locks you. That's the one that our local pioneered. Ray, the new one, and
Ooh.
Lion, which is basically
Lion
just
too, yeah.
Cosmos. Basically, I if you were like, well, I run my Cosmos with Musica 2, the second Musica, I'd be like, cool. That's the same deck.
Yeah.
Whether you want to run it with the second Lion or the second Musica and you are playing Cosmos, it's the same deck. It functions absolutely the same.
All right. Good to know. So if you like Lion, but you also like Cosmos, then...
Yeah, and again, the only reason I put Nova down in C, and probably should be at the bottom of B tier, to be honest with you, is just because it's a very hard deck to pilot. Like, there's a lot of decision points. And if you make the wrong decision points, you make the wrong decision points and you won't be successful with it.
Yeah, Ott 2 is a lot like that as well. I don't know. I think it's fine being in C tier.
Yeah, and so being above the line, just to be clear here.
The ones that you cover.
Just to be clear here, the only reason I have that line there in the first place is the giant swath of decks covered nowadays.
Yeah, this would be like a 4-hour long podcast if we went through every single center.
Yeah.
It would just be so
I
long.
think there's like 40 of them now. I just can't keep up with that many decks. I'm not Mr. Moneybags over here.
Yeah.
and I mean, like, you'd be like, well, aren't half your decks just proxied? And I'd be like, yeah, I still am not Mr. Moneybags. That's a lot of printer ink.
Yeah, that's a bit too much for us. We hope you understand, but please feel free to comment any decks that we haven't mentioned in the comment section down below.
And I'm really actually starting to feel in that thing too, where, like, for example, one of the decks that are on here, but I don't have a physical deck for anymore is mono white Akino, because I think mono white Tamago is this better version of the deck, and it's
Well, it's not really mono white if it's Tamago.
Oh, sorry, Tama.
Yeah.
I forgot. I just said the ago at the end.
Iggy
Because
sensei.
again, it's like the same deck, so I just don't run it. You know.
Yeah.
I
So
think-
we got Hirana with red aggro and Enderburn.
Yep, that's at the very top. So I think, and this you'll see when we get to S tier, that Enderburn has shifted a little bit in terms of its importance in the metagame. I think it's less important now. I still think
I
it's
agree.
good, but I don't think it's something that you need to warp your main deck over anymore.
I think that's always been true as well, personally. Like, we really first experienced a center with an Enderburn package with Love It, and it really wasn't that popular because it just didn't really work that well. But also going up against, like, more top tier decks that have Enderburn, it's just like, for me, whenever I'm playing against something like that, it's only ever like, that's a little inconvenient, but
Yeah.
it's not devastating for me.
And that's the thing too, where it's like you're not, the way that the game goes, especially because you're an aggro deck, you're not depriving them of enough Enter that you're keeping them off of Enter for the rest of the game, right? So you need the right amount to keep them off their 3-stop or something for most of the game, or make it inconvenient for them, you know? And it is worth mentioning that Hirana probably does Enderburn better at this point than X does, because of the fact that Hirana has access to Akino Bye Bye. And Akino, what's the other one? Akino Rock. These are Enter denial pieces. and white has Enter Denial in it. So I think if you were going to be doing an Enter Burn deck at this point, it'd be a fool's errand to not be red white.
Well, it wouldn't be a fool's errand, but it would not be the most optimal choice.
Right, you're right. Okay, that's fair.
I also think that maybe classic Anj might even be a little bit better for Enter Denial, but that's only if you're going really aggro.
Yeah.
Because you're not putting it back. You're not vanishing anything.
Yeah,
which is true as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is the white support there helps. So I think that's where Hirana lies. I still think Glory Grow is a good card.
I agree.
And the funny thing is, there's
it's kind of OP.
I was gonna knock it down to C tier because I was like, oh yeah, well there's Machina Guardian Dragon as a piece right now, and that stops attacks, right,
Sure.
from Elrigs, which would stop the Double Crush from Glory Grow.
Yeah, but if you're playing Hirana, you're not really looking to stop attacks. You're looking to give attacks.
Right, I'm saying someone else would be stopping your
Oh,
Double
yeah.
Crush Hirana attack, and the thing is that card just doesn't exist in the metagame. I really haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. There might be some people playing it, and if you're playing it and you are beating Hirana up, good for you. I'm being serious. Good for you. It's a good card.
Yeah.
But I just don't see it. I just see people running Xenocluster,
Right.
and they're not running MGD, and I don't think that's wrong either. I think there's so much discard and so little Hirana that you're making the right choice to do that, and because of that, Hirana actually maintains a little bit of power because it can't get its main function shut down.
So, moving on to Bang 2, you've already mentioned this one. This is your build.
Yes.
Have you seen this in the Japanese meta?
A little bit.
So you're kind of putting it B tier because...
Because of me, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I'm just saying...
If you...
I have played against a lot of these other decks when testing for this, and I keep winning.
Yeah, I mean, you... It's not like this isn't backed by numbers. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, but I'm also...
that everything on this list, you've really crunched the numbers for it. It's not like you're just putting it in B tier because you feel like it.
These are not popularity contests either. These are power contests, which is the more powerful version of the deck. Now, you can take any of these lists and run them to success. We said that in this. The reason why this list exists is more of a ranking of viability and power than it is of popularity.
Yeah.
So I don't care if there's only one person running X and they keep consistently winning, then that shows that there's a power in X.
Yes.
But my reasoning for Bang is, and I'm not results blind. Like, I play Bang and I can tell you straight up there's a lot of cards in it that I'm like, I need to swap this out. I need to change this. This wasn't that powerful, right? And that's me admitting that Bang is not as strong as I want it to be. And that's why I put it in the top of B tier. I think it's really good. I don't think it's A tier material.
No, I don't think so as well.
And that's why I'm saying, like, as far as what it does, I know that it loses against certain matchups or against certain players who are smart enough to snuff out certain things that I'm trying to do. But I can be realistic about its power level, and its power level is actually really strong in this meta because this meta has a lot of white and blue.
Yes, as you will see in the color teams, there is a lot of dubs flying around.
And what this deck really does well is it lancers through annoying Signy like Exia or Penlight or any of these other crazy Signies that white puts out that are like very defensive, and it just says, I don't really care what you do here.
Yeah,
I'm lancering through. The other thing that it does really well is it mills your opponent out really well. And what do blue decks do a lot of? Drawing cards.
Oh, drawing, yeah.
So their mill count is it's very easy to mill them out for damage.
Speaking of white and blue cards, let's move on to the next two. We've got Madoka 2 and Umar 2, which are similar.
Yes.
But being an Umar 2 player myself, I will say that Madoka 2 is significantly annoying to play against as Umar. So I agree where they are in this list. It seems like blue-white discard decks are incredibly popular right now. They're certainly not the worst decks to choose when you want something that is more tempo but also very powerful and disruptive to your opponent.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons, by the way, that Ray is down on C tier is because it's also kind of the same thing. It's just a tempo white-blue discard deck. And I think that's just sort of like when you compare it against what Umir is doing and you compare it against what Madoka's doing is
it's just not as efficient.
It's not as efficient.
Yeah, it's a little more like I don't know. It kind of tends to do a lot of stuff on its own turn and not a whole lot of disruption interaction. It's just yeah.
But I will say that that's something that's sort of differing between Madoka 2 and Umir 2 last set were kind of very similar. Madoka 2 has proven that it may be doing the blue-white thing a little bit better, although the damage push in that deck is not as good as Umir's is. Mm-hmm. But you've been finding with your Umir that the damage push isn't enough anymore.
Yes.
You're looking for a longer game.
I honestly think it's smarter for an Umir 2 player to... the original Death and Taxes build, it was very much discard and taxes so that you're draining the opponent's resources. But there is a small switch to push for damage, and I just don't think that's the most efficient way to play Umir since we have gotten the new set. I think that longer games with tempo and attrition will probably be a better build for Umir 2 in the long run to be able to maintain a B tier position with the new set coming out in February.
Yeah, that will change Umir completely at that point. And we won't go into it, guys, right now. But
you'll have to wait for the
Umir
next
will be
podcast.
a much better deck after that.
Yes.
And just the last note on that Umir stuff, because I don't want to dwell on it too much, is that if you look at Hastalic and you were to say what's better than one discard,
2,
what's
3.
What's better than one enter burn?
Yeah, so the longer Hastalic is on the field, the more you get out of it. And so the longer game makes that much more worth your while.
Right. I think Umir eventually will evolve into a control crusher. Where it's like, oh, you wanted to play till turn 8. We're going to go till turn 11, and you're going to hate every second of it.
All right, let's move on to Lion. So we're still seeing is this Lion 2 or is this Classic Lion? Classic Lion with classic Endless Punchline combo and still Team Card Jockey. A very consistent deck with some new flavor with the new set.
And very few upgrades.
If you
were a Card Jockey player from like set 1, you've been like, ooh, I've only spent $30 on this game since I originally set
that deck has some longevity, and with the new cards that have come out, there are some new tricks that you can add to it to kind of boost it a little bit more. But overall, it's a very consistent deck. I've actually considered switching back to it. You all know that outside of Ancient Surprise, the Card Jockey team is another one of my favorites. I literally have Lion's hat. A friend made it for me that I wear to ceremonies as a good luck charm. So I've actually been considering revisiting this deck myself.
The truth is, right, Lion basically lives or dies if people are playing MGD. And people are not playing MGD, therefore it's living.
I just don't see people playing that as often, like you mentioned earlier.
It was played more in last set. This set, everyone's on Xenocluster. And they're right. I mean, would you rather randomly quash the 1 out of 30 Lion players, or would you rather be able to defend yourself against the 1 out of 3 discard players? Right? That's why you play that Xenocluster instead.
All right, so not too much to update you guys on that one. Now we got Yuzuki. This is a new center.
I've moved it up. It was like at the bottom of C tier, and I've recently moved it up. I had a long conversation with one of our viewers, also consistently tops the ceremonies,
Autumn. She's one of the best red aggro players.
I have not played a lot of red aggro with this set and the set prior, so I went to her and was like, I need the deets. I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on here and a pretty good deck building understanding, but what's going on? I'm seeing a lot less red aggro, by the way, in the meta, and that's one of the reasons why I'm asking you guys in general, like, put my feelers out there. Are you guys still seeing red aggro?
Yeah, especially if you're in different cities. You guys know we're located in Atlanta, so what's it like in LA, New York, like Tennessee? I don't know, wherever you guys, Florida, wherever you tend to play, let us know.
And she's still consistently doing well with various red aggro decks. But one of the things that we talked about was maybe Enterburn isn't the way that X is going, and I had like a long conversation because I'm really on X Enterburn, so I had to get talked basically off of it.
Right.
I eventually have kind of come seen the light from her angle and been like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. We're off now.
Yes.
And because we're off of that now on X, right? I still think you could run X Enterburn. I just think it would probably drop to the top of B tier if you did that. I think that Yazuki is really good at Enterburning, and not specifically Enterburning as in I keep your opponent down to 0 enter. More like it keeps your opponent off of whatever card they've splashed for their 3-stop, right? Because even like in Bang, right? I'm only running 8. I'm only running 8 blue sources and 7-ish black sources. So if any of these cards like came here, or like Yazuki, and then surgically removed one of my colors, I'd be limping.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And that's something that Yazuki does really well. And I think that is kind of pushed it up. It has a little trouble maintaining its Enterburn abilities and its abilities to also push damage. Something that Hirana does, I think, a little better, just because it has natural ways to push damage with its white removal and also go to the top. But Yuzuki has some interesting things going for it. Being free from having to be in team is interesting as well, because it allows you to pick weird options like Umir Clear. And like
love it. We love Umir Clear.
It's super strange.
In this house.
I highly recommend anyone who is looking at Yuzuki to pick up that deck. You might think I'm crazy, but the truth is, if you play Umir Draw, you can now draw 2 cards, and then Umir Clear probably draws you 3 cards. Yeah, I know it's a wheel effect, but it
no, Umir Clear makes the opponent discard 1 less, and everybody discards their hand. You draw 1 more than what you started with. They draw 1 less than what they started with, and if you pay an extra, you can down your opponent's Lurig.
It frees it. You can freeze your opponent's Lurig.
I thought it was down.
Well, it's like the same effect, but it keeps it down.
Yeah, it keeps it down.
So the reason why I say this is because it's basically it mirrors what Hirana does with Rei, which is draw a bunch of cards. So it allows it to be hyper aggro. But with Umir, when you're playing against a lot of these blue decks, who have drawn a lot of cards, their hand is usually sometimes 6 big. So making them discard that whole hand that they've been really purposefully trying to
and some of you save up guards in your hand.
Yeah, really purposefully trying to sculpt, right? Can screw them. But more importantly, it technically mills them for 5. And then mill is damage in this game.
Yes.
So it helps push that
especially aggro. In long games. Mill, the longer a game goes, the more likely you are to refresh, even if you're not running that package.
And you know where the refresh damage goes into the trash, which means it's enter denial. So it
something
fits
to
well.
think about. All right, let's move on to Pyrrhuluke. Pyrrhuluke's got a discard mid-range. Do you think that Pyrrhuluke as a blue center and discard is starting to replace Rei?
Probably.
Probably,
but the one thing it's probably not replacing is Tamago.
No, but we'll get to that.
And that's the reason why it's in B tier. I think there's a blue-black deck. It's very strong. It makes you discard stuff. It's sort of a control deck. You can play it with Rei. You can play it with Pyrrhuluke. You can play it with Tamago. I think you'd rather play it with Tamago.
Yeah, I mean that is the difference between Pyrrhuluke, Rei, and Tamago. Is that Rei is skewing more blue-white, and Pyrrhuluke is skewing blue-black.
Yeah, and that's because
so it gives it a little bit of a different flavor.
In Rei's deck, the damage output with Assassin matters more than the discard. In Pyrrhuluke, the discard matters more than the damage output. Like it's like the damage output with Assassin in Rei is the focus, and in Pyrrhuluke, the discard enables the damage output. So you have to it's putting the cart before the horse in Pyrrhuluke, right? Like you have to discard to enable you doing those negative effects through Pyrrhuluke's ability. and that helps you push damage. The thing is, I think Tamago's better because it can go longer game, and it also is able to freeze things, and it also has more access to consistent discard, which is why I like Tamago better than Paraluke. But they're the same deck, basically.
More or less.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that harkens back to what we mentioned earlier is, pick the archetype you like to play and pick your favorite center, and there you go. That's the one that you can play. So really quickly, let's move on to Akino 2. This looks like it's still your typical late game defensive white. Has there been any major updates with Akino?
No, I mean so Akino was the mono white deck of the last set. I think Tamago has dethroned it a bit. Sorry, Tama has dethroned it a bit.
Yeah.
And that's just because Tama is able to get more reach and a little bit more of a damage burst, right? It can threaten 5 damage in one turn, whereas Akino really can only ever threaten 4 damage a turn. And that's something that differentiates Tama from Akino. I do unironically think that Akino might be the better mid-range white deck right now. I don't think it will keep that throne as of next set. I think next set, when a new Signy comes out called Picture Frame, it's a picture frame, Tiffany.
You know what? I want to make an entire deck that's just objects. Like it's just blanket, space heater, wine cellar,
dude,
picture frame.
You would love to play Yu-Gi-Oh! and they just have lots of foods that
I
you
would
can be
not
playing.
love to
There's
play
like
Yu-Gi-Oh!
There's like a burger.
I'm gonna make a whole object and food based deck, and y'all better watch out because I'm gonna make it work.
Probably would be okay too.
If I can make Umar work, I can make a food object based deck work.
Got that blanket. Got that heater.
Blanket.
Got that wine cellar.
All right. Let's go to Harana.
Got that treadmill.
Oh my god. I can't. Oh, those designs are always so funny to me.
What I was saying though is I think Akino actually is pretty okay mid-range wise. You have to play Akino like as this sword and shield kind of deck, not as just like you have a spear and you're throwing it like Tama does. Tama's just very aggressive. Push damage. Akino wants to push damage, but its damage comes from the Elrig deck. But it wants annoying Signy like Exia more than it wants Remember, because it wants a Signy that'll survive to its next turn.
And Exia will. It's so difficult to deal with.
And then it can pull damage output from that. So that's the reason why it wants to do that.
All right, so now we've got Harana. Is this the original Harana?
Yeah, it's the original Harana. It's just mid-range.
Mid-range good stuffs with red, black, and blue.
Yeah, it's basically your idea of like. So Hirana is kind of an interesting card in the fact that it can go mid-range or it can go aggro based on its ability, right? And it is kind of similar to Tama in that respect. That's actually one of the reasons why it's also lower on the list, is because Tama just sort of outperforms its job as well. But it's just basically like you're playing some kind of 3-stop. You're probably playing, the reason why black is in there is you're probably playing what is it called? Why am I brain farting? Machina. And you're playing those two, right? Like something like that, some kind of 3-stop and some kind of Machina, and you're just playing good stuff. You're playing like all these cards are pretty good, and I'm going longer game and I'm winning with this.
All right, so now we're going to move up to our A tier, and the list is significantly shorter.
Yeah, and arguably the S tier could probably merge with the A tier. I've been thinking about that and being like, I don't know if these two S tier decks are actually top of A tier or they're S tier. Yeah. I have them through a very minor separation, but
I mean, we're starting to get into like Olympic percentages at that point.
Right. I think they slightly outperform the others, but only slightly. And the top of A tier is Tama White Aggro.
Surprising no one. If you have played at all, you've seen this deck absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's more rampant on the locals end than it is at like the loot card tournament right now. And I think that's something we're going to see in the comments, is that people are going to be like, oh, I've seen a bunch of mono white.
Well, I got to tell you, when I was playing in the loot card, it was all mono white, or white, primarily white with a little bit of blue, except for you random bang deck. Everything else was like that.
And my deck was built to beat the white decks.
Exactly.
Which is
you built a meta buster.
I know. White has gotten really good, guys. I don't know what else to say. Like this last set, came out with tons of good, not only two separate different types of white cards, mono white cards and mid-range white cards.
Yeah.
Like aggro white cards and mid-range white cards. White is a really, really strong color now.
It is. It very much is.
I mean, to the point where I'm even being like, with Bang, like, I
Maybe
probably
I
could throw
put in-
white
yeah.
and take out blue and it'll be fine. But it is very, very strong. I think that Tama aggro is very good because it pushes damage while energize. And I think that's a little layered, but also it's just got raw power behind it.
It
now.
really does.
Like, Remember is just really strong. So I can't remember how to pronounce it, but the fish, the blue fish,
You're talking
Sorella
about-
or something like that.
Gotcha.
Coella is really, really strong. It's just got a lot of tools now to work off of. So I think it's probably top of A tier.
All right, so now we've got Tamago 2. We've talked about this one a lot already. It's the Tamago 2 discard control deck.
It's the one that won the last ceremonies.
Yeah, so we're looking at like a blue-black deck now. I thought that people really liked the blue-white build of this.
No, there wasn't really ever a blue-white build.
Oh,
but
my mistake.
There was a blue-black build that was just discard focused.
I'm sure, I'm more than certain you guys have played against this deck before.
Some version of it, I'm
Yeah.
sure. It did really well at the ceremonies. And a lot of top players decided to play with it. And I think it's good. I'm not willing to put it on the S tier list because I think it loses pretty hard to mono white.
I think that's probably true. Discard has a really hard time keeping up with white. As somebody that has a discard package in my deck, it's really difficult to get white to cooperate with your win condition.
They just draw a couple extra cards during their turn and then play because all their damage just comes from their Elrig deck anyways, and you can't discard their Elrig deck. So they just
Wouldn't that be wild?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can't interact with it. So
Yeah.
they just are going to main deck destroy you, or Elrig deck destroy you.
Yeah.
And I think smart mono white players who aren't just like turning things sideways and not thinking about stuff can really realize how much reach they have through a game. And Tama is a huge upgrade to mono white aggro because those decks that will then draw out the game, the mono white player goes like, all right, I'm out of main deck, or I'm out of Elrig deck removal. My Tama deals damage twice a turn, no matter what. From here on out, you only have 4 guards, maybe 5 with some of the new stuff that's happening. You can get cards back. It will eventually kill you. You can't wall it.
Yeah. Yep. All right, so now we've got a Deus aggro
Interaction resistant.
Oh, okay. Interaction resistant with your typical team.
Yeah. So it's
Is this like classic Deus, the kind of Deus that we've run into before when DMX first came out?
yeah, it's on team. I mean, it's
Yeah.
aggro, right? So it's not like Atomic Deus, which is its whole thing. We'll talk about that separate. Let's just skip this one for now because X and Deus is the same deck. At this point, they are the same deck. The only difference is one focuses a little bit more on recursion, one focuses a little bit more on damage. But generally speaking, they're the same deck since I've talked to Autumn about this.
All right. So moving on, you've got a second Tama deck in this A tier, which is interesting. Just a huge Tama presence since she's come out. But this one is a W plus, it's a white plus any color, really?
Yeah.
But it's at the bottom of the A tier. So can you explain some of the differences of the top tier and bottom tier?
Sure, it's mid-range versus aggro. That's basically it, right?
So you think that a white aggro white deck, sorry, that was redundant. A white aggro deck outpaces a white mid-range deck, despite us going for longer games?
I think they're two different decks is really what they are. And it's strange to say that, right? Because it's got the same center, but again, this is the idea of
Archetypes over
centers. And that mid-range is well positioned in this meta. It is very clear now that you can take, and Tetris just recently put out an article on this type of thing with assist Elrigs, and he kind of named them all, like economy and stuff. It's got pretty cool classifications. But the thing that he made really clear was that the standard and probably universal best version of your Elrig level 2 setup is something that stops 1 damage and gets you some kind of value, right? Akino, for example, could do that. Akino, bye-bye. Stops damage and also opens a lane and also gets you back a guard, right? Machina Smash stops 1 damage, opens a lane, and gets you back the best card in your trash. And you pair it with a 3-stop. And if you can pair it with a 3-stop, you have basically all of the ability to stop damage on your thing. Are they doing a minor damage push? Cool, you've got a way to stop a minor damage push while keeping your 3-stop in reserve. Are they going for the whole lane filled for explosive damage? Cool, you're ready to deal with that as well. Are they only doing something that's 2 damage? Cool, your 3-stop can still stop that. It feels bad, man, but it still does it. And so that's sort of universally what mid-range is now. You run that kind of L-Ring deck. And it works. It suppresses aggro, and it also gives you a really good shot at winning against these other mid-range decks too, and other control decks. So Tama functions differently as a center in both of those. Tama's ability to down your Signy and attack a second time is damage reach when you no longer have damage push in your aggro deck. But in your mid-range deck, well, the way that it does it is you are enter starving your opponent by not attacking with those Signy, and then you're dealing damage anyways, so you're going long game with it. And that's the way that mid-range Tama functions. Now, there's 2 different versions there, basically, that I said, covering my bases here. There's a blue-black version, but that's just your standard blue-black discard deck. All they're saying is, hey, my damage output is going to be a little higher because I'm using Tama. But it's the same blue-black deck. And then there's a red-green version, and that's got a little bit of a combo flourish. It kind of actually works like a mid-range card jockey deck.
Oh, interesting. All right.
So, yeah.
All right, finally, moving up to our S tier, there are but 2 decks available in our S tier.
I still think these are the 2 top decks of the format. I think both have been played significantly less at the start of this set. And that's one of the reasons why I'm asking you guys, what have you been playing against? Because for some reason, I don't see much X and Atomic Deus. But it also might just be my area, right? My locals and our loot card experience doesn't have much of these 2 decks. That being said, I've talked to some other people who've been like, no, it's Atomic decks everywhere. And that's just their locals, so it's Atomic decks everywhere.
We haven't seen that too much, really. We haven't seen a lot of people playing any of the DXM centers
it was usually
at
me.
all. Yeah, it was usually you, but mostly people just want to play what they want to play.
And again, this list doesn't talk about metagame. It lightly talks about metagame prevalence. It mostly talks about power in a vacuum. And I think that X and Deus still are the top dogs. And that's because Atomic Deus does one thing really, really well. 2 things really, really well. It hammers your opponent down with damage. It's very consistent with that. More consistent than Tamago is, for example. And it reduces your opponent's resources by getting rid of their hand. So it does both of those things. And draws you your cards. So you end up with a really good defensive shell on your own end, too. H2O is a hell of a thing to try to pierce through. And then X, after talking to Autumn, I've decided she's right, that you no longer are going with this enter burn package. You're becoming interaction resistant. Now, let's talk about what that means. With Tengu and Laluru and Tama, you have a bunch of cards that basically say, I don't care what my opponent's doing, I'm attacking. Right? Tengu can't be downed by your opponent's effects. Laluru can't have new effects added onto it, so it stops Machina Bind's ability of saying, when the Signy attacks, it kills itself, or it stops the Lion's effect of, when the Signy attacks, it can't attack, right? The other 2 things those things really stop really well are Folklores, right? Folklore says, target 2 things, tap them. If you kept your 2 Tengus in reserve for that life burst, you won't get blown out. And then Tama says it has Shadow Signy level 2 or less, which means that, it can still be stopped by and we're talking about the Black Tama Signy, by the way. It says it has Shadow Signy level 2 or less. And why is that good? It stops it from getting life bursted. So you keep that one in reserve when your opponent's hoping their life bursts are going to bail them out. I was talking to Autumn, and she said the only life burst she's afraid of is Akufuku.
I told y'all Akufuku is a good green card.
Akufuku literally won me the last loot card tournament.
It really did. It really
literally
did.
I revealed it was like, woo, I win this game now.
Yeah. Yeah. If you guys didn't tune into that match, it was pretty nail bitey.
Yeah. Turn 11 Akufuku. So
Aku for the win.
So it's worth mentioning that this deck is just really efficient at basically being like, I don't care what you do on your side, I'm going to aggro you down. Mm-hmm. And I think that is better than Enterburn, right? Because the Enterburn package was specifically there to stop 3 stops from killing you. Mm-hmm. However, this deck does that still with Lalaru and Tengu. You still are saying you won't stop my attacks with your assist Elrigs. And red black has access to a lot of recursion between Death Deck and Trigger Victory. Mm-hmm. So you were able to bring those threats back again and basically be like, yeah, you got rid of them last time, but guess what? They're here again. Mm-hmm. You just really put that pressure aggro down. I think it's the right move to go forward with, and I'm seeing it mirrored in Japan as well.
All right, so that said, now we've got a Deus Atomic Flare. So this is basically the same atomic aggro deck, but with an atomic...
mid-range, but
yeah,
it's a mid-range deck. It has...
With blue-black.
It has... The thing that it has that the other blue-black decks don't have is consistent damage output. Mm. So the reason why I like Atomic better than Tamago, for example, is... And you've said this before when you were playing... you have the ability to shift gears.
Yes, so, I do like decks that are a little bit more, like I said, they're like a gas pedal more than anything. So Deus is a lot like this.
So like, for example, Tamago really has no way to push damage at level 1 and even level 2. Mm-hmm. Deus has tons. Mm-hmm. And the ways that it push damages are ridiculous. It can do negative 10,000 at level 2 and negative 8,000 at level 1. That's insane.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's so much. And it's on demand, right?
Yeah, with the souls.
So, not with the souls. These are the level 1 and level 2 Signies, right? PA and BP.
Right.
So, because it has access at such low level to do removal, it can play a control deck if it wants to and play the game slower if it needs to against aggro decks. But if also it ends up in a scenario where it's like, I got to put a clock in place.
Right.
It starts opening up 4 damage a turn.
Yeah.
As early as turn 1 or 2 if you want. So the deck is versatile in that fact, where it can change its own pace. Not only that, it gets guards really well. It gets it has access to removal. It has access to discard really easily. It has access to basically any of the kind of cool Elrig deck stuff that you might want to do. And if you really wanted to switch it to be a little bit more controlling, you could add white to it really easily, throw some Exias in, and lower your atomic count from 22 to 16, and you have a control deck on your hands now. Like you've shifted it to fit with the meta now, and it's really good. Like that's the thing, is it's versatile. So that's why I have it.
And that's why it's in the S tier. Yeah. All right. And that's our current tier list. Let us know if you guys agree, disagree in the comment section down below, though it's a little hard to disagree with numbers. But we would love to hear from you about your thoughts and opinions, your favorite Lorigs, your favorite archetypes, what you tend to play against. We love reading all of your comments. So
it's true. I there's been a little bit of a decrease in comments, and it's made me a little sad. But because I like talking to you guys.
Yeah, we really do like interacting with our community, and I know that we've been away for that, but it was the holidays and we're back at it now. So I hope you guys will be back at it with us as well.
For a whole more year of
For a whole more year of Wixoss. It is going to get really interesting in February, and we'll go over that when that happens. In the meantime, please make sure you subscribe so you never miss our podcasts. And as always, may you always flip a life burst. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.